Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Renu Kataria and with me is VC Pramod bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida expressed serious concern over ongoing conflict and humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, reiterate call for an immediate cessation of violence and dialogue to resolve Ukraine conflict. India and Japan reaffirm their common vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific free from coercion. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Australian counterpart Scott Morrison to hold second India-Australia virtual summit on Monday. UN Human Rights Office says at least 902 civilians killed and 1,459 injured in Ukraine since conflict began. Pakistan National Assembly to take up no trust motion against Prime Minister Imran Khan on 25th March. World Sparrow Day is being observed on Sunday to raise awareness about the bird. And in All England Open Badminton Championship match underway between Lakshya Sen and top-seeded Victor Axelsen of Denmark for men's singles title. As we start the bulletin, we appeal to our listeners to stay safe from COVID-19 by following these 4 simple steps. Get fully vaccinated, wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki doori for social distancing and focus on hand and face hygiene. And now the news in detail. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida have expressed serious concern about the ongoing conflict and humanitarian crisis in Ukraine and assessed its broader implications, particularly to the Indo-Pacific region. In a joint statement on Saturday night, the two leaders emphasized that the contemporary global order has been built on the UN Charter, international law and respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of states. They underscored the importance of safety and security of nuclear facilities in Ukraine and acknowledged active efforts of the International Atomic Energy Agency towards it. They reiterated their call for an immediate cessation of violence and noted that there was no other choice but the path of dialogue and diplomacy for resolution of the conflict. The Prime Ministers reaffirmed their shared commitment to the total elimination of nuclear weapons and remained resolute in the task of strengthening international cooperation to address the challenges of nuclear proliferation and nuclear terrorism. Both the leaders highlighted their commitment to working in tandem towards a peaceful, stable and prosperous world based on a rules-based order that respects sovereignty and territorial integrity of nations. They emphasized the need for all countries to seek peaceful resolution of disputes in accordance with international law without resorting to threat or use of force or any attempt to unilaterally change status quo. In this regard, they reaffirmed their common vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific free from coercion. Mr. Modi and Mr. Kishida shared the view that the economies of both countries in such a world would be powered by robust bilateral investment and trade flows through diversified, resilient, transparent, open, secure and predictable global supply chains that provide for economic security and prosperity of the peoples. Mr. Modi and Mr. Kishida welcomed the Quad Leaders Summits in March and September last year and renewed their commitment to delivering tangible outcomes on the Quad's positive and constructive agenda, especially on COVID vaccines, critical and emerging technologies, climate action, infrastructure coordination, cybersecurity, space and education. The Prime Ministers expressed deep concern at the growing threat of terrorism and underlined the need for strengthening international cooperation to combat terrorism in a comprehensive and sustained manner. The Prime Ministers reaffirmed their resolve to make the India-Japan Special Strategic and Global Partnership more robust and complementary in view of the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations in 2022 through people-to-people exchanges, tourism and sports.
In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on India-Japan Summit and the road ahead. In conversation are Ms. Deepa Gopalan Vadva, former ambassador to Japan, and Sanjay Jha, journalist.
Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has completed his two-day visit after attending 14th India-Japan Annual Summit in New Delhi. This was his first visit to India since he took charge of the office last year and also his first meeting with Prime Minister Modi. India and Japan have multifaceted cooperation within the ambit of spatial, strategic and global partnership. And this time we saw strong language against Pakistan for terror attacks, humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, nuclear non-proliferation, pact on cooperation in 5G, cyber security, import of Japanese apples, and export of Indian mangoes. So India-Japan Summit seems to have covered a vast ground. What do you think we have achieved from this summit this year, Ambassador Wadhwa?
This is the 14th annual summit between the Prime Ministers of India and Japan. As you're perhaps aware, that Japan is one of the very few countries with which we have this institution of annual Prime Ministerial Summits. What does this mean? That our Prime Ministers meet every year. There has been a break in this continuity because of COVID. Otherwise, they have been meeting from 2006 regularly every year. And the significance of this particular meeting really is that this was Prime Minister Kishida's first bilateral visit anywhere. Normally, you have Japanese prime ministers, their first visits are to their allied partner, which is the United States. But I think Prime Minister Kishida has chosen India as his first stop on a bilateral visit, which is significant in itself. He's also taken the first opportunity with COVID sort of behind us, at least a lull, to come to India and make sure that our cooperation is further widened and deepened, which is what these summits do. And you have very rightly said, it is an extremely multifaceted relationship. We do call it a special, strategic and global partnership. It covers a range of issues, which is not only bilateral, but we look at regional issues, we look at multilateral issues, we look at global issues, and very importantly, in the context of the bilateral relationship, we look a lot at not of the political relationship, which is relatively issue-free, because we are bound as to democracy, common values and congruences on various subjects as we look at the world, but also that very, very important for India is a deepening of our economic relationship with Japan. So I think during this visit, we have covered all that ground. And you mentioned in particular, for example, the statement has named Pakistan by name in the context of terrorism that is sponsored from its territory. This has, of course, been mentioned before in joint statements, but it's important that we have reiterated it. For me, I think what has been very important is that in the statement, we talk of collaborating on humanitarian front in Afghanistan. I think this is something new and which should be welcomed, because I think both of us see the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. We do have reservations. We do want to make sure that it is not used as a staging ground for terrorist activities against any other country. But on the other hand, that as two responsible countries, we are willing to step in where there is a humanitarian crisis. You mentioned on the economic front, of course, that we have a CEPA, we have a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. And what we did sign among the various agreements that were signed, 6 or 7 agreements that were signed, is to just widen some of the items of the list. So Indian mangoes, Japanese apples, fish, because our marine exports are a very, very important part of our exports to Japan.
There has been a consistent progress in economic partnership between two countries. We know that Japan is one of the largest investors in India, and Japan has invested heavily in many of our mobility projects. Most of our metros are funded by them. And one of the big projects, Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed rail corridor, is in progress. It is also funded by Japanese money. Now, in this trip, Japan has further announced an investment of 5 trillion yen, which is roughly around the 3.2 lakh crore in India over the next 5 years. How significant is this investment? How much this investment will help us in terms of our infrastructure growth?
I think Japan has consistently, and this is not really a very new phenomenon, but maybe starting from the 50s, they have been a very important source of ODA for India in very key areas of importance to India. This is diversified in the last 2 decades, and particularly in the last 5 to 7 years, where they have become a very important FDI investor into India. They're now at number 5, I think, in terms of FDI investment. And during Prime Minister Modi's first visit to Japan in 2014, the Japanese came up with a figure at that point of time of 3.5 trillion yen of public and private investment and financing into India over 5 years, which will be directed both to the private and the public sector. This has been achieved. And now they have come back, and obviously India is a very responsible partner. So where very often the ODAs in forms of loans, we are very good in paying back our loans. Japanese investments in India have done very well. And therefore, I think this time around, Prime Minister Kishida has come with even a larger package, which is 5 trillion yen, which is about $42 billion. Again, this for the same thing, it will be both public and private investment and financing, and over a period of 5 years. And I think they've probably been very encouraged by the progress that they achieved the first time around with the first tranche, and they believe that this can be done. And the economic relationship is really, as I said, very, very important to us. We certainly could do with probably better trade figures than we have at the moment, but there's a huge potential, which is why we've been adding more to the list of goods and products that we are trading with between the two of us. And also FDI, certainly with all the schemes that we have in India, I think there's a huge potential for Japan to come in here, because ease of doing business in India, we have been over time improving not only the ease of doing business, but also very receptive to the Japanese requests made of us. And I think they appreciate that. So going forward, I think we're going to see much larger investments, and they have, in a way, in these agreements, they have identified some areas with a lot of potential. And among these, I would say, would be areas such as electric vehicle infrastructure, renewable energies, and they will help us with this entire transition in energy. So the areas that are important to climate change, which is extremely important to India as it is to Japan, and the outcome of the recent COP26, I think in that area, there are a lot of areas of cooperation, which also are actually business opportunities for both countries, for both Japan and India. So the sky is the limit. There's much more we can do. There's much that is happening in the economic relationship, and there's much more that we can do. And I would like to mention one particular agreement, I think, which is of significance. It's not so much of an agreement as an initiative, and this initiative is for sustainable development of the Northeast region of India. And here also they have listed out the various areas in which they will be going into: the bamboo value chain, connectivity, infrastructure. As you know, this is an area of certain vulnerability in India, economic vulnerability. And this is where we feel very good to have Japan as a partner to come and help in the development of this area.
The joint statement between two countries said that the Prime Minister Kishida looked forward to attracting more highly skilled Indian IT professionals to contribute to the Japanese ICT sector. This seems to be going to be a very good opportunity for our IT companies to find a big market in Japanese economy.
I think this memorandum of cooperation in the field of cybersecurity is very significant, because we know what is happening in the world. Japan and India have had a joint working group on cybersecurity for several years now. And our experts do meet regularly, and we do exchange, I think, information and best practices between the two countries. But this now seems to concretize that cooperation that the joint working group has identified. This is indeed very, very important, pertinent to the world as it stands today. You talked about the digital partnership. Yes, indeed, this is another new front in our relations. Japan, not only have we signed on this digital partnership, but they have also set up a fund of funds, which is to fund our new startups. And quite a number of our unicorns in India have got Japanese funding. They're extremely interested in this particular area. In the area of skills, so there were two aspects of this. One is, of course, Japan has already been welcoming IT professionals, not only now for quite a period of time. And I could tell you from my own experience as ambassador there, that the number of Indians in Japan is almost double from the time that I was there. And I think most of this doubling has been IT professionals. So they have been most welcomed in Japan. In addition to that, the Japanese have come up with a program which is called the Specified Skills Worker Program. It's called SSW. And they are training up Indians, the Japanese Indian Institutes of Management and the Japan Endowed Centers in our IITs and so on. And this is to train up Indians to understand kind of the Japanese needs or the standards of manufacturing. And from among these people, they are recruiting a lot of those who have done these courses to go to Japan. This is one area where we are looking at skilled workers. There's something else called Industry Intern Program, where also also our people are going. So there is, as you know, there's a growing population in Japan. There is dire need of a young and energetic workforce. And here again, we have a perfect fit. So what is happening is that Indians are being trained, and we will see, I suppose, more Indian trained and highly skilled workers being welcomed in Japan. And this again is a very important area that has been covered during this summit.
Thank you so much for your time, Ambassador Wadhwa.
Thank you very much, Sanjay.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Australian counterpart Scott Morrison will hold the second India-Australia virtual summit on Monday. The Ministry of External Affairs in a statement said that the summit follows the historic first virtual summit which was held on the 4th of June in 2020, when India-Australia bilateral relationship was elevated to a comprehensive strategic partnership. During this virtual summit, the two leaders will take stock of the progress made on various initiatives under the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. The summit will lay the way forward on new initiatives and enhanced cooperation in a diverse range of sectors between India and Australia. The leaders are expected to commit to closer cooperation in trade, critical minerals, migration and mobility in education, among others. They are also expected to discuss views on regional and international issues. The summit highlights the importance that both countries attach to their bilateral relations as well as their close cooperation in regional and international issues. The India-Australia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership has maintained the momentum of an upward trajectory. Both the countries continue to collaborate closely despite the COVID-19 pandemic in wide-ranging areas including science and technology, defense, cyber, critical and strategic materials, water resources management, as well as public administration and governance.
Ukrainian authorities on Sunday said the Russian military bombed an art school where about 400 people had taken refuge in the port city of Mariupol. Local authorities said the school's building was destroyed. However, there is no immediate word on casualties. Authorities also said that Russian forces also bombed a theatre in Mariupol on Wednesday where civilians were sheltering. Meanwhile, the Russian military said it had carried out a new series of strikes on Ukrainian military facilities with long-range hypersonic and cruise missiles. According to UN Human Rights Office, at least 902 civilians have been killed and 1,459 injured in Ukraine since the conflict began. OHCHR said most of the casualties were from explosive weapons such as shelling from heavy artillery and multiple launch rocket systems and missile and air strikes. Chinese State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi on Sunday reiterated the country's stance on Ukraine, saying that it is objective, fair and consistent with the wishes of most countries. State media reported Wang Yi's remarks, which came after a video meeting between President Xi Jinping and US President Joe Biden on Friday, in which she appealed for negotiations to bring the crisis to a halt, and Biden stressed that consequences await Beijing for any support it provides to Moscow. Wang reiterated the priorities that all parties should propel dialogue and negotiations, an immediate ceasefire to avoid civilian deaths and prevent humanitarian crisis. He noted, saying that it is the only way to achieve a lasting, secure European continent.
Chinese State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with Secretary General of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization SCO Zhang Ming in Beijing on Thursday. This was the first meeting between the two since Zhang Min, a Chinese career diplomat, took up his new post on the 1st of January this year. The meeting assumes importance as it comes in the backdrop of the Ukraine crisis, which has entered the fourth week. According to a press release issued by the Chinese Foreign Ministry, Wang Yi said as the international organization covering the vastest territory and the largest population, the SCO, facing various impacts brought by the Ukraine crisis, should play a more active role in maintaining security and stability in the region and beyond. Secretary General Zhang Ming said the SCO closely follows the situation in Ukraine and hopes that peace can be restored and the security for all can be ensured at an early date so as to realize lasting peace and stability in the world. Wang Yi urged to deepen solidarity and coordination among member states and strengthen mutual support. India joined the SCO in 2017 at the Astana Summit. China reported more than 4,000 new cases and 2 COVID-19 deaths on Saturday, the first COVID-19 deaths in the country since Jan 2021. The 2 deaths were reported in Jilin, the worst-hit province, which saw nearly 80% of the new COVID-19 cases. It pushed authorities again to stick to their much-criticized dynamic zero-COVID policy, which has put enormous pressure on local governments and banned most foreigners from entering China. In its worst outbreak since Wuhan in 2020, China has reported nearly 30,000 cases since the beginning of March across 28 provinces, with more than 10,000 in Jilin alone. Chinese President Xi Jinping has also emphasized this week to adhere to zero-COVID policy, as the country has put millions of people in lockdown to cut the transmission chain in at least a dozen cities, including the manufacturing hub Shenzhen. The financial hub Shanghai is in a state of partial lockdown and has reported record daily COVID-19 infections on Saturday.
In Pakistan, National Assembly Speaker Asad Kaiser has summoned the session of the lower house to deliberate on the opposition's no-confidence motion against Prime Minister Imran Khan on the 25th of this month. According to a notification issued from the National Assembly Secretariat on Sunday, the session will convene on Friday next week. It was summoned after the joint opposition made the requisition for it under Article 54 of the Constitution, along with the submission of the no-confidence motion against the Prime Minister on March 8th. United States and Bangladesh held the 8th Partnership Dialogue in Dhaka on Sunday. Bangladesh Foreign Secretary Masood bin Momen and the visiting U.S. Under-Secretary for Political Affairs Victoria Nuland discussed a range of issues encompassing political, economic and security domains during the Partnership Dialogue. Bangladesh and the U.S. discussed ways and means to enhance trade and investment and possible cooperation in the blue economy. The two countries also exchanged views on Indo-Pacific strategy. Bangladesh shared its perspectives on national, regional and global security and geopolitical scenarios with the U.S. side, said the statement issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Bangladesh. Bangladesh expressed its willingness to continue bilateral collaboration in security and defense domains. This will be further discussed in the upcoming security and defense dialogues, said Foreign Secretary Momen.
Bangladesh has underscored the need for having an economic component in the Indo-Pacific Strategy (IPS), said a press release issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Bangladesh after the 8th round of annual partnership dialogue held between Bangladesh and the US in Dhaka on Sunday. In response, the US side said that an economic framework of the IPS would be released soon. The two governments agreed to continue to cooperate closely to advance a shared vision of a free, open, inclusive, peaceful and secure Indo-Pacific region. Bangladesh Foreign Secretary Masood bin Momen and the visiting US Under-Secretary for Political Affairs Victoria Nuland discussed a range of issues during the partnership dialogue. Sri Lanka cancelled exams for millions of school students as the country ran out of printing paper, with Colombo short on dollars to finance imports, officials said on Saturday. Education authorities said the term tests scheduled a week from Monday were postponed indefinitely due to an acute paper shortage as Sri Lanka contends with its worst financial crisis since independence in 1948. The Department of Education of the Western Province said that school principals cannot hold the tests as printers are unable to secure foreign exchange to import necessary paper and ink. Official sources said the move could effectively hold up tests for around two-thirds of the country's 4.5 million students. Yemenis Houthi rebels unleashed a barrage of drone and missile strikes on Saudi Arabia that targeted key facilities including natural gas and desalination plants early on Friday. The Saudi-led military coalition said Houthi aerial strikes targeted a range of facilities including a Saudi Arabian oil company, Aramco, liquefied gas plant in the Red Sea port of Yanbu, a power station in the country's southwest, and a desalination facility in Al-Shaqiq on the Red Sea coast. This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
Indian Information and Broadcasting Secretary Apurva Chandra took a tour of the MBC studios in Dubai on Sunday. It is one of the largest television networks in the Arab region. His visit aimed at discussing best practices, fostering collaboration between Indian and MBC networks. On the 18th of this month, Mr. Chandra had inaugurated the Media and Entertainment Week at India Pavilion at the Dubai Expo in presence of Bollywood actor R. Madhavan. Sunday is the World Sparrow Day. Every year, March 20th is observed as World Sparrow Day to raise awareness about the bird. The need for marking this day was felt due to the tremendous decrease in its population. The house sparrow is on the verge of extinction. The first World Sparrow Day was celebrated in 2010 in different parts of the world. We have a report.
House sparrows once abounded virtually every continent of the world, so much that they came to be popularly known as the common house sparrow. One can just be happy watching these chirpy brown-winged creatures, but now the bird's population is rapidly declining everywhere, and India is no exception. It is an initiative started by the Nature Forever Society of India along with the Ecosys Action Foundation of France. The theme for World Sparrows Day this year is I Love Sparrows. The theme is inspired by the hope that more and more people will come forward to celebrate the bond that humans have had with sparrows in the past. The only way to bring the sparrows back is by people's participation, such as keeping a bowl of water and some grains for sparrows to feed on, plant trees in and around your homes to create shelters for them, and keep bird feeders outside your house. Aarti Rana, News Desk.
In the men's singles final of the All England Open Badminton Championship, world number 1 Victor Axelsen of Denmark beat Indian shuttler Lakshya Sen by 21-10 and 21-15 in straight sets to win the second title. Earlier, Sen defeated defending champions Ji Jia 21-13, 12-21, 21-19 in the semi-final tie last night. Axelsen, on the other hand, defeated Xiao Tian-shen in the other semi-final and will play his fourth successive final at the All England Open. Earlier in the day, Akane Yamaguchi was crowned women's champion after she defeated South Korea's Ahn Se-young in the final.
Now let's take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Let's take a look at the press reports on China. Mint reports India on Saturday briefed Japan about the talks with China to resolve the standoff in eastern Ladakh. The visiting Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida also briefed Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi about his perspective vis-à-vis East and South China Sea. South China Morning Post reports, quoting experts, China's zero-COVID policy pushes cash-strapped local governments to the brink. China is clinging to a zero-tolerance approach to the pandemic that relies on stringent lockdowns, mass testing and quarantine in government facilities. Let's take a look at what made the headlines in Bangladesh. 6 persons were killed when a passenger ship drowned in the Shitalkhaya River in Narayanganj Sadar Upazila on Sunday after being hit by a cargo ship, reports Daily Star. 6 bodies have been recovered and 20 people are still missing. Let's now have some brief news from Afghanistan. Tolo News reports Afghanistan is listed as the world's unhappiest country for the second year in a row. The World Happiness Report placed Afghanistan as the world's unhappiest country, while Finland remained the world's happiest country. Now let's have a look at what made the headlines in Nepal. The Himalayan Times reports that Asian Development Bank DG for South Asia, Kenichi Yokoyama, concluded his 4-day visit to Nepal on Sunday. During his visit, Yokoyama reaffirmed the ADB's continued strong support to the government of Nepal's development agenda.
A quick look at the headlines once again. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida expressed serious concern over ongoing conflict and humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, reiterate call for an immediate cessation of violence and dialogue to resolve Ukraine conflict. India and Japan reaffirmed their common vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific free from coercion. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Australian counterpart Scott Morrison to hold second India-Australia Virtual Summit on Monday. And in All England Open Badminton Championship match, Victor Axelsen beats Lakshya Sen to win the second title. And with that, we end this news bulletin. We will be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.